name is Wil Divine. I want to give you an introduction of myself and my company. My family's been involved in the oil business for 3 generations. My great-great-grandfather was one of the founders of the Union Oil Company. And my stepfather, whom I was raised by, was a wildcatter in West Texas. And, I was raised with him and watched him drill many wells over many years. And unfortunately, back in the 50s and 60s, the oil business wasn't that profitable. And unfortunately, he died broke and left my mother in difficult financial circumstances. I had no plans to be in the oil business. I didn't want to be a farmer and rancher, and was in college to do that at Cal Poly University San Luis Obispo. But my mother was in difficult financial circumstances and wanted to find out if my stepfather left anything of any value behind. So I didn't know anything about the oil business, so I started working in the oil fields just outside of San Luis Obispo to learn the business. And I self-taught myself petroleum engineering, geology, geophysics, land work, just by taking old textbooks and rewriting them out in the oil field when we had breaks. And also just asking a lot of questions to all the petroleum engineers and geologists and all the oil company personnel. But I decided to, learn the oil business the hard way and, go out to West Texas and work on oil rigs. And I did. Worked 100 hours a week, slept in my car for 6 months, and did every kind of job imaginable, and saved my money up, and through the winters of West Texas, and, then started my first oil company. So the start of my first oil company was me roughnecking on oil rigs at night, and during the day is being an oil executive trying to further my way in doing exploration and production of oil and gas in West Texas. And I would spend my time looking through old dry holes that other people had drilled to see if there's anything of any value left behind. Primarily undeveloped discoveries, or also what they would call orphan wells, that people had abandoned wells and left behind. But I had no money, and so I had to continue to work on oil rigs, and eventually decided to come back to California since I was born and raised here. And actually, you get paid twice as much for the same work on working on oil rigs. So I worked on oil rigs here in California and onshore and offshore. At the same time, I continued to run my oil company. And after some time, I got some oil and gas properties, primarily here in California, properties that nobody else wanted, mostly liabilities to other oil companies. And I put together a few dollars. People would give me properties, and I would try to figure out a way to get them producing again. And from that, those small amounts of monies to try to, continue the oil company and make it successful and try to get additional investment. Basically, I took over everyone's well from hell here in California and also in various other states. But the most prolific situation was where an oil company would drill an undeveloped discovery and decide that it wasn't big enough for them to develop, and so that they would abandon it. So I saw this as a great opportunity for me to acquire these undeveloped discoveries and try to make them productive. I saw this internationally as well, so I did accumulate a large number of properties here in California. This is back in the late 80s, and it was very difficult to make any money because oil was selling for around $10 a barrel. And much of the oil that I was producing was heavy oil, and was even selling for less, like $6 a barrel. So, albeit I had a lot of properties, it was very difficult to make any money. And generally, having oil wells in the state of California is a license to be crucified. So, no money and no help, and a lot of, difficult relations with the governments that were orchestrating or administrating these wells, particularly when an oil company doesn't have any money. So basically, looking at undeveloped discoveries was more of a profitable situation where we could acquire those discoveries for very little money and take them from the liabilities that the oil companies could relinquish. After a while, I determined that this could happen exponentially internationally. So determined that oil companies perhaps would drill discovery wells all over the world, but decide for one reason or another not to develop them. So there, I thought, lied the opportunity. So I proceeded to go around the world looking for these undeveloped discoveries and accumulated a list of approximately 12,000 undeveloped discoveries around the world. Back in the 80s and early 90s, oil companies, large oil companies, had the luxury of going into countries and only developing the huge fields and leaving all the small fields, especially the gas discoveries, undeveloped. So I pursued that and found that trying to acquire these concessions and develop them required hundreds of millions of dollars. And I had very little money. I was a small California oil producer, barely making it. And so decided to create a consulting company that would help independent oil companies here in the US and around the world secure these undeveloped discoveries. And there was born Concessions International.